My parents always said, "Your sister's the firstborn. She deserves the best." So she got the house, the savings, even grandma's jewelry. I didn't argue. But then she blew it all on clubbing and makeup. She showed up at my door with sunken eyes and said, "I need help. I've got nothing left." I just looked at her and said, "Funny. That's exactly what you left me with." Then I closed the door and watched her walk back to her Uber with no return ticket. I, 32M, grew up hearing the same phrase every time anything important came up in our family. My parents would look at me with that apologetic smile and say that my sister deserved the best because she was the firstborn. It started small when we were kids. She got the bigger bedroom, the newer bike, the first choice of birthday party themes. I learned early not to complain because complaining meant disappointing mom and dad, and disappointing them meant being the difficult child compared to my perfect older sister. When I turned 18 and started looking at colleges, I discovered the harsh reality of our family's financial priorities. My parents had saved money for education, but most of it went toward my sister's expensive private university and sorority fees. I got enough for community college and was told I should be grateful for that much. My sister studied communications and spent most of her time at parties, but she was living her dream, and that's what mattered to my parents. After college, I worked 2 jobs while living in a tiny apartment, slowly building my career in IT support. Meanwhile, my sister moved back home after graduation, claiming she needed time to find herself. She spent her days sleeping until noon and her nights at clubs and bars. My parents supported her completely, saying she was going through a difficult transition period and needed their understanding. When our grandmother passed away 3 years ago, I expected we might finally be treated equally. Grandma had always been kind to both of us, and I thought maybe her will would reflect that. Instead, my parents sat me down and explained that they had discussed it with my sister, and she should inherit everything since she was the eldest. The house, the jewelry collection, the savings bonds, everything went to her. My parents assured me this was for the best since my sister hadn't quite found her footing yet and needed the security more than I did. I watched my sister sell our grandmother's house within 6 months. She claimed she needed liquid assets to start her influencer career and couldn't be tied down to property. The money from the sale, combined with the savings and the jewelry she pawned, gave her what must have been close to $400,000. She moved into an expensive downtown apartment and started living like a celebrity. For the next 2 years, I saw her life unfold through social media posts. Expensive dinners every night, designer clothes, exotic vacations, and an endless parade of cosmetic procedures. She got lip fillers, breast augmentation, a nose job, and treatments I couldn't even identify. Her Instagram showed a lifestyle that would make millionaires jealous, all funded by our grandmother's legacy. My parents praised her for following her dreams and building her personal brand. When I visited for holidays, they would show me her latest posts and talk about how proud they were of her entrepreneurial spirit. They never asked about my life or acknowledged that I was now managing a small IT team and had finally saved enough to buy a modest house in the suburbs. The first signs that something was wrong came about 8 months ago. My sister's posts became less frequent, and when she did share something, it looked different. The clothes were still expensive, but I started recognizing outfits from previous posts. The restaurants weren't as upscale. The vacation photos stopped completely. My parents mentioned during one of our rare phone calls that my sister was going through a rough patch. They said her influencer career was more challenging than expected, and the market was very competitive. They asked if I had heard from her lately, which surprised me since we barely spoke unless forced to at family gatherings. 3 months ago, my parents called with panic in their voices. They had been trying to reach my sister for weeks, but she wasn't answering their calls or responding to messages. They had driven to her apartment building, but the doorman told them she had moved out. They didn't know where she was living or how to contact her. They asked if I had any information, which I didn't. Last month, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. When I answered, I heard my sister's voice, but it sounded different, hoarse and shaky. She told me she was in a tough spot and needed to talk to someone in the family. She asked if she could come over to my house, and something in her tone made me agree even though we hadn't spoken privately in over a year. When she arrived that evening, I barely recognized her. The woman standing at my door looked like a shadow of the polished person from her social media photos. Her hair was unwashed and pulled back in a messy ponytail. She wore old jeans and a wrinkled sweatshirt that looked like she had been sleeping in it. Most shocking were her eyes. They were sunken deep into her face with dark circles that makeup couldn't hide. She came inside and sat on my couch, looking around my modest living room like she was seeing it for the first time. I offered her water and asked how she was doing. She started crying immediately and told me everything had fallen apart. The influencer career never took off the way she expected. Brands weren't interested in working with her after the initial novelty wore off. She had been spending money faster than she could ever hope to earn it back. She explained that she had been living off credit cards for the past year, taking cash advances to pay rent and maintain her lifestyle. She thought the money from grandma's inheritance would last forever, but expensive habits add up quickly when there's no income to balance them out. The cosmetic procedures alone had cost her over $50,000, not counting the maintenance treatments needed to keep up the results. When the credit cards maxed out, she started borrowing money from friends, promising to pay them back once her career took off. When those friends stopped lending, she found loan sharks who were happy to help, but charged interest rates that would make credit card companies blush. She had been living in her car for the past 2 weeks, showering at gym chains and eating fast food when she could afford it. She looked at me with desperation and asked for help. She needed money to get back on her feet, enough for an apartment deposit, some basic furniture, and food while she looked for a regular job. She promised she had learned her lesson and would pay me back as soon as she could. She talked about getting into real estate or maybe going back to school for something practical. I sat there listening to her story and thinking about all the times I had watched her get everything while I got nothing. I thought about working 2 jobs while she partied through college. I remembered watching her sell our grandmother's house and blow through a fortune that could have set up both of us for life. I considered all the family gatherings where my achievements were ignored while her social media posts were celebrated. She finished talking and looked at me expectantly, waiting for me to offer the help she needed. She reminded me that we were family and that family takes care of each other. She said she knew I had always been responsible with money and probably had savings that could help her get a fresh start. She promised this would be the last time she would ever ask for anything. I looked at her sitting there in my living room, probably seeing it as small and pathetic compared to the lifestyle she had been living. I thought about how she had never asked about my life, never congratulated me on my promotions, never acknowledged my hard work. She had only contacted me now because she was desperate and had nowhere else to turn. The words came out before I had fully formed the thought. I told her it was funny that she was asking me for help now, because having nothing was exactly what she had left me with all these years. She looked confused, like she didn't understand what I meant. I explained that every time our parents chose her needs over mine, every time I was told to be understanding because she deserved the best, I had been left with nothing. And now she wanted me to fix the mess she had made with the fortune she got instead of me. She started to argue that the family decisions weren't her fault, that she never asked our parents to favor her. I reminded her that she had definitely asked for grandma's entire inheritance, and she had been perfectly happy to take everything without considering whether it was fair. She had made choices with that money, and now she was living with the consequences. She became angry then, saying I was being cruel and petty. She accused me of holding grudges and being jealous of her success. She said I was supposed to be her brother, and that meant being there when she needed help. The irony of her talking about family obligations wasn't lost on me, considering she had never been there for me when I needed support. I stood up and told her it was time for her to leave. I walked to the front door and held it open, making it clear that the conversation was over. She followed me, still pleading and trying to convince me to change my mind. She said she was desperate and had nowhere to go. She promised she would do anything to pay me back and make things right between us. As she stood in my doorway, still begging, I realized this was probably the first time in her life that being the firstborn didn't automatically get her what she wanted. For 30+ years, she had been given priority in everything, and now she was discovering what it felt like to be told no. I almost felt sorry for her, but then I remembered all the times I had been told no, so she could be told yes. I watched her walk down my driveway toward the Uber that was waiting at the curb. She turned around once to look back at my house, probably hoping I would change my mind and call her back. I stayed in the doorway until the car drove away, then went inside and locked the door behind me. Update 1. 2 days after my sister left, my parents called. They had somehow tracked down my phone number and wanted to know if I had heard from her. I told them she had visited, but didn't go into details about our conversation. They asked if I knew where she was staying, and I honestly told them I didn't. They sounded worried and asked if I could help them find her. That conversation opened a door I had kept closed for years. I asked them why they were suddenly so concerned about family helping family when they had never expected my sister to help me. They seemed confused by the question, so I reminded them of every time they had chosen her needs over mine. Every time they had told me to be understanding while she got everything she wanted. My father got defensive and said they had always done what they thought was best for both of us. He claimed they had tried to prepare me for the real world by teaching me independence while protecting my sister because she needed more support. The logic was so backward it was almost funny. Apparently being responsible and hardworking meant I deserved less help, while being irresponsible and wasteful meant she deserved more. My mother started crying and asked why I was being so cruel when my sister was in trouble. She said family should stick together during difficult times, and I was being selfish by holding old grudges. I pointed out that my sister had been in trouble before. She had been in trouble her entire adult life, and they had always enabled her instead of letting her face consequences. The conversation ended with my father telling me I was disappointing them and that they had raised me better than this. The irony was incredible. After 30 years of disappointing me, they were upset that I was finally disappointing them back. I told them that if they were so concerned about my sister, they should help her themselves instead of expecting me to clean up the mess they had helped create. Update 2. A week later, I discovered my parents had started a GoFundMe campaign for my sister. They posted photos of her from better times and told a story about how their daughter was going through temporary difficulties and needed community support to get back on her feet. They shared it on Facebook and asked all their friends to contribute whatever they could. The campaign raised about $300 in 2 weeks before they took it down. Apparently, several family friends had asked uncomfortable questions about where all of Grandma's money had gone and why her own family wasn't helping her. My parents probably realized that the whole story would come out if they kept pushing for donations. Around the same time, I heard through a cousin that my sister had been staying in a women's shelter downtown. The cousin mentioned it casually, assuming I already knew, and seemed surprised when I told her I had no contact with my sister. She asked if there was some kind of family drama, and I just said it was complicated. I thought about the shelter information for a few days. Part of me felt guilty knowing she was in such a desperate situation, but I kept reminding myself that she had created this situation with her own choices. She had started with more money than most people see in a lifetime, and she had blown through it all in pursuit of a lifestyle she couldn't sustain. Update 3. Last week, I got a message on LinkedIn from my sister. She had apparently found my professional profile and was trying a different approach. The message was formal and businesslike, asking if I would be interested in discussing a potential business partnership. She said she had learned valuable lessons about social media and marketing during her influencer period and thought we could work together on something profitable. I didn't respond to the message, but I did look at her LinkedIn profile out of curiosity. She had created an impressive-sounding work history that made her sound like a successful marketing consultant and brand strategist. The timeline was creative. Somehow her years of partying and spending had been transformed into strategic business development and client relationship management. 3 days ago, she sent a follow-up message that dropped the business pretense. She said she knew I was angry with her and that she understood why I felt the way I did. She acknowledged that she had made mistakes and wasted opportunities that many people would have treasured. She asked for a chance to prove she had changed and said she was willing to work any job, no matter how humble, if I could help her get started. The message was well written and seemed sincere, but I couldn't forget the desperation in her eyes when she had shown up at my door. This felt like another manipulation, just with better grammar and a more strategic approach. She had spent years perfecting her image on social media, and now she was trying to perfect her image as a reformed person who deserved a second chance. I realized that responding to her at all would just encourage more contact, so I blocked her on LinkedIn and made my profile less searchable. I had built my career through hard work and careful choices, and I wasn't about to risk it by getting involved in whatever scheme she was planning next. Yesterday, my mother called and said she had heard from my sister. Apparently, my sister had told her that I was refusing to help family members in need, and that I had become cold and selfish. My mother wanted to know what had really happened between us and why I was being so stubborn about helping my own sister get back on her feet. I finally told my mother the whole truth about my sister's visit and our conversation. I explained that I wasn't obligated to fix problems that had been created by years of bad decisions and family favoritism. I reminded her that actions have consequences, and my sister was finally experiencing the consequences of her actions. My mother argued that forgiveness and second chances were important family values, and that holding grudges would only hurt everyone involved. I told her that helping someone who had never helped me, who had taken everything and left me with nothing, wasn't about family values. It was about enabling destructive behavior. The conversation ended with my mother saying she hoped I would reconsider my position before it was too late to repair the relationships that mattered most. I told her that the relationships that mattered most to me were the ones I had built with people who treated me with respect and fairness, not the ones based on obligation and guilt. As I write this, I keep thinking about that moment when my sister stood at my door asking for help. For a split second, I considered giving her money just to make the situation go away. But then I realized that making the situation go away wasn't actually solving anything. It was just postponing the next crisis while rewarding the behavior that had created this crisis. My sister had always gotten what she wanted because someone else would step in to fix her problems. This time, nobody stepped in. This time, she had to face the reality that her choices had consequences and that other people weren't obligated to rescue her from those consequences. I still don't know where she is or what she's doing now. Sometimes I wonder if I made the right choice, but then I remember all the times I needed help and was told to figure it out on my own because it would make me stronger. Maybe this will make her stronger too. Or maybe it won't. But either way, it's not my responsibility to find out. The door is closed, and I'm keeping it that way.